The October air hung heavy over the Blue Ridge Mountains, thick with mist that clung to the peaks like wet wool. Detective Marcus Riley stood at the edge of the Appalachian Trail parking lot, watching forensic teams comb through the abandoned pickup truck that had sat there untouched for 3 weeks. Inside, they'd found 2 camping permits, a half-empty thermos of coffee, and a photograph of 2 young men grinning at the camera. Brothers, according to the missing persons report filed by their frantic mother. Thomas and Daniel Brennan, ages 23 and 19, last seen heading into the mountains on what was supposed to be a 4-day hiking trip. Marcus had worked missing persons cases before, but something about this one settled wrong in his gut. The truck was too clean, too organized. No signs of struggle, no indication they'd ever returned from the trail. Just gone, as if the forest had simply swallowed them whole. "Detective!" A young officer approached, holding an evidence bag. "Found this wedged under the driver's seat." Marcus took the bag, examining the contents, a crumpled receipt from a gas station in Asheville, dated the morning of their disappearance. On the back, someone had scrawled a phone number and the words, "If lost, call Mom." Before we dive deeper into this mystery, I'd love to hear from you. Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's continue unraveling what happened to the Brennan brothers. Patricia Brennan's home in Charlotte smelled of lavender and old grief. She sat across from Marcus in her living room, clutching a tissue that had long since dissolved into shreds. The walls were covered with photographs. Birthday parties, graduations, fishing trips, a shrine to her sons. "They were always close," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. After their father died, Thomas took care of Daniel, practically raised him. He was so responsible, Detective. He would never just disappear without telling me. Marcus leaned forward. "Mrs. Brennan, did either of them mention meeting anyone before the trip? Anyone unusual?" She shook her head. Thomas had just gotten his engineering degree. He was starting a job in Raleigh the following month. Daniel was in his 2nd year at community college, studying graphic design. They just wanted one last adventure together before Thomas moved away. What about their relationship? Any tension between them? Patricia's eyes flashed with something defensive. They loved each other. Sure, they argued sometimes, what brothers don't, but nothing serious. Daniel looked up to Thomas, worshipped him. Really? Marcus made notes, but his instincts told him there was more. Families always believed they knew everything about their loved ones, but everyone had secrets. The question was whether those secrets had anything to do with their disappearance. The search and rescue operation lasted 2 weeks. Teams scoured 30 square miles of wilderness. Following every trail the brothers might have taken, they found a campsite that matched the description from the permits. Evidence of a fire, trampled grass, but nothing conclusive. No blood, no signs of violence, no bodies. By November, the case went cold. The official theory was that they'd gotten lost, possibly fallen into one of the many ravines that scarred the mountain landscape. Without bodies, there could be no closure. Patricia Brennan visited the mountains every month for the next 18 years, leaving flowers at the trailhead, praying for answers that never came. Marcus retired in 2015, but he never forgot the Brennan brothers. Their file sat in a box in his garage, next to a dozen other unsolved cases that haunted his sleep. Sometimes he'd pull it out, spread the photographs across his workbench, and try to see something he'd missed. The smiling faces in that truck photo mocked him. Young men full of life, reduced to a cold case number. The documentary crew arrived at Marcus's door on a Tuesday morning in October 2023. Exactly 18 years after the brothers vanished. They were filming a series about unsolved disappearances in national parks and wanted to feature the Brennan case. Marcus was reluctant at first, but the producer was persistent. "Maybe someone will recognize them," she said. Maybe someone saw something back then and didn't realize it was important. They filmed for 3 days, retracing the investigation, interviewing Patricia, who looked 2 decades older than her 68 years, and hiking the same trails the brothers had planned to explore. The producer, a woman named Jennifer Cole, was thorough and respectful, understanding that these weren't just stories, but real people with families still suffering. "What's your theory?" Jennifer asked Marcus during their final interview, cameras rolling. Marcus stared at the mountains in the distance. "Honestly, I think they're still out there, not alive. I'm not that optimistic. But somewhere in those woods, there's an answer. Maybe they took a wrong turn. Maybe they encountered someone. Maybe it was just bad luck and worse weather, but they're out there. The documentary aired in March 2024 on a streaming platform that specialized in true crime content. It was well-produced, thoughtful, and heartbreaking. Patricia watched it alone in her living room, crying through all 6 episodes. The response was immediate. Social media erupted with theories, amateur detectives dissected every frame, and the streaming service's servers crashed from the traffic. But one response stood out from the rest. The email arrived at the production company's general inbox 3 weeks after the documentary's release. The subject line read, "About the Brennan brothers. I think I'm one of them." Jennifer Cole almost deleted it as spam. They'd received hundreds of messages from conspiracy theorists, attention seekers, and well-meaning but misguided viewers. But something made her open it. "My name is Adam Wright. I'm 37 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I was watching your documentary about the missing Brennan brothers, and when I saw the photograph of Daniel Brennan, I saw myself. I know this sounds insane, but I need to talk to someone. I have no memories before 2005. None. I woke up in a hospital in Seattle with no ID, no memory of who I was or where I came from. They told me I'd been found unconscious near the Canadian border, suffering from severe hypothermia and head trauma. I've spent 18 years trying to figure out who I am. After watching your documentary, I think I might finally know." Jennifer's hands shook as she forwarded the email to Marcus. She called him immediately, reading the message aloud while he sat in stunned silence. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "Does he have any proof?" "He included a photo. I'm sending it now." Marcus's phone buzzed. He opened the attachment and felt the air leave his lungs. The man in the photograph was older, weathered, with a scar across his left eyebrow and grey threading through his dark hair. But the bone structure was identical. The same slight asymmetry to the smile, the same distinctive widow's peak. It was Daniel Brennan, or someone who looked exactly like him. "We need to contact him immediately," Marcus said, "and we need to tell Patricia." "Are you sure? What if it's not him? What if this destroys her?" Marcus thought about the woman who'd spent 18 years mourning, who'd aged into a ghost of herself. She deserves to know, even if it leads nowhere. She deserves the chance. Adam Wright sat in a coffee shop in Portland's Pearl District, his laptop open to the documentary's paused first episode. He'd watched it 17 times now, each viewing bringing new fragments that felt almost like memories, but remained frustratingly out of reach. The photograph of the 2 brothers on the screen haunted him. The younger one's face was his own, he was certain of it, but younger, fuller, unburdened by whatever had happened in those mountains. His therapist, Dr. Nina Patel, had diagnosed him with retrograde amnesia years ago, likely caused by severe trauma. She'd been skeptical of the documentary connection at first, suggesting it might be the brain's attempt to construct a narrative where none existed, but even she had to admit the physical resemblance was uncanny. "Memory is complicated," she'd told him during their last session. "Sometimes we remember things that never happened. Sometimes we forget things that define us. If you pursue this, you need to be prepared for any outcome." But Adam couldn't let it go. For 18 years he'd been adrift, a man without a past. He'd built a life in Portland, worked as a carpenter, made friends, even had a relationship that lasted 3 years before his emotional walls became too much. But there was always an emptiness, a sense that he was living someone else's life, waiting for his real one to begin. His phone buzzed with an unknown number. His heart hammered as he answered. "Is this Adam Wright?" The voice was male, older, with a thick southern accent. "Yes. My name is Marcus Riley. I was the lead detective on the Brennan brothers case. I need to ask you some questions." Adam's hand tightened around the phone. "Okay. Can you describe the scar on your eyebrow?" It's about an inch long, slightly curved. I've had it as long as I can remember, which isn't saying much." "Do you have any birthmarks?" Adam pulled up his sleeve, looking at his left forearm. "There's a birthmark on my left arm, shaped kind of like a crescent moon." He heard Marcus's sharp intake of breath. Daniel Brennan had the same birthmark in the exact same place. "It's in the missing persons report." The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too loud. Adam stood abruptly, walking outside into the drizzle. "What happens now?" "Now we need to verify. DNA test, medical records, anything that can confirm your identity. But Adam or Daniel or whoever you are, I need to tell you something. If you're Daniel Brennan, then we still don't know what happened to your brother Thomas. And we need to prepare you for the possibility that whatever happened in those mountains was something your mind chose to forget for a reason." Adam stared at the grey Portland sky, rain mixing with tears. He didn't remember starting to cry. "I need to know. Even if it destroys me, I need to know who I am. Then we'll find out together. I'm booking a flight to Portland. Don't talk to anyone else about this yet. Not the media, not friends. We do this carefully." After hanging up, Adam sat on a bench outside the coffee shop, watching strangers hurry past with their umbrellas and purpose. They all knew who they were, where they came from, where they were going. He envied them that certainty. For 18 years, he'd been a blank slate, a man constructed from nothing. Now, suddenly, he might be someone's son, someone's brother, someone who'd been mourned and searched for and never forgotten. The weight of it pressed against his chest like a physical thing. Marcus arrived in Portland 2 days later, accompanied by Jennifer Cole and a forensic specialist named Dr. Raymond Chen, who carried a DNA testing kit. They met at Adam's apartment, a modest one-bedroom in the Alberta Arts District, filled with furniture he'd built himself. Tables, chairs, shelves, all crafted with the precision of someone who found comfort in tangible creation. "Thank you for agreeing to this," Marcus said, shaking Adam's hand. The detective was older now, greyer, but his eyes were sharp and assessing. Adam recognized the look. He'd seen it in mirrors, that wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. Dr. Chen swabbed the inside of Adam's cheek while Jennifer set up a camera. "For the documentary follow-up," she explained. "If you're comfortable with it, this could bring closure to a lot of people." Adam nodded, though the word closure felt inadequate for what was happening. This wasn't an ending. This was an excavation, unearthing something that had been buried deep. "Tell me about Seattle," Marcus said, settling into one of Adam's handmade chairs. "What do you remember about waking up in that hospital?" Adam had told this story to doctors, therapists, social workers, and police officers over the years, but it never got easier. November 2005, I was in Harborview Medical Center. A park ranger had found me near the North Cascades, hypothermic, dehydrated, with a severe head injury. I was unconscious for 3 days. When I woke up, I didn't know my name, where I was from, how I'd gotten there. Nothing. "Did they find anything on you? ID, wallet, phone?" "Nothing. Just the clothes I was wearing. Jeans, a flannel shirt, hiking boots. Everything was torn up, muddy. They ran my fingerprints but got no matches. No one reported me missing. It was like I'd just materialized out of nowhere. Marcus made notes. The North Cascades are about 300 miles from where the Brennan brothers disappeared. That's a significant distance to cover on foot. I know. I've looked at maps obsessively for years. I don't know how I would have gotten there, but the timeline matches. The brothers disappeared in October. I was found in mid-November. That's about 3 weeks. 3 weeks in the wilderness would explain the condition you were in, Dr. Chen interjected. The head trauma. Do you have medical records from that time? Adam pulled out a folder he'd prepared, thick with documents. Everything's here. CT scans showing the skull fracture, treatment notes, psychological evaluations. They kept me in the hospital for 2 months while they tried to figure out who I was. Marcus flipped through the pages, his expression growing darker. This level of injury, you're lucky to be alive. Whatever happened to you was serious. They said the same thing 18 years ago. The neurologist told me I might never remember, that the trauma could have permanently damaged the parts of my brain that store long-term memory. Adam paused, his voice dropping. But sometimes I have dreams, or maybe they're memories. I see mountains, darkness, someone calling my name. And there's always this feeling of having lost something important. Someone important. Jennifer leaned forward. Could that someone be your brother? I don't know. I've never been able to hold on to the dreams long enough to understand them. They slip away like water. The DNA results took 4 days. Marcus stayed in Portland, interviewing Adam extensively, trying to find any detail that might unlock the mystery. They visited the Seattle hospital where Adam had been treated, reviewed old security footage that was barely visible after nearly 2 decades, and tracked down the park ranger who'd found him, a man named Gerald Hutchins, now retired and living in Bellingham. Hutchins remembered the case vividly. Worst condition I'd ever seen someone in, and still breathing, he said, sitting in his living room surrounded by photographs of mountains and wildlife. He was lying in a ravine, half covered in leaves. If I hadn't been tracking an injured elk, I never would have found him. Another day, and he'd have been dead. Did you find anything else nearby? Marcus asked. Any signs of a second person? A campsite, anything? Hutchins shook his head. Just him. We searched the area thoroughly, thinking maybe there'd been a hiking accident or something, but there was nothing. It was like he'd dropped out of the sky. Is it possible he'd traveled from the Blue Ridge Mountains, 300 miles south, on foot, through wilderness, in that condition? Hutchins looked skeptical. I suppose anything's possible, but it seems unlikely. More likely he'd been in the Cascades and gotten turned around. Hypothermia does strange things to people. They wander, lose direction. I've seen experienced hikers end up miles from where they should be. But Marcus's instincts told him there was more to the story. The distance between the 2 locations wasn't the only mystery. There was still the question of what had happened to Thomas Brennan, and why, if Adam was indeed Daniel, he'd ended up alone in Washington state. The call came while Adam was at work, building cabinets for a restaurant renovation in downtown Portland. His phone buzzed with Marcus's number, and his hands went numb. Adam, the results are back. Marcus's voice was careful, controlled. The DNA is a match. You're Daniel Brennan. The hammer slipped from Daniel's grip, clattering against the concrete floor. Around him, co-workers continued their tasks, oblivious to the fact that his entire world had just reformed itself. He was someone. He had a name, a history, a mother who'd been searching for him for 18 years. Does she know? His voice cracked. Does Patricia know? Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. This is going to be overwhelming for both of you. We need to prepare for the media attention, the questions, the investigation that's going to reopen. But most importantly, you need to prepare yourself. You have a mother who never stopped looking for you, a woman who's been in hell for nearly 2 decades. Daniel sat on a stack of lumber, trying to process the enormity of it. What about Thomas? What about my brother? That's what we need to figure out. Daniel, I need you to try to remember. Whatever happened in those mountains, it's the key to everything. Your brother is still missing, and you're the only person who knows what happened to him. But I don't remember. I've tried, Marcus. God knows I've tried. Maybe seeing your mother will help. Maybe being in familiar places will trigger something. We'll work with neurologists, trauma specialists, whatever it takes. But we need to try. That night, Daniel sat in his apartment surrounded by photographs that Jennifer had sent him, images of his life before, a childhood home in Charlotte, family vacations, school photos showing a gap-toothed kid with a mop of dark hair, and pictures of Thomas, always Thomas, his older brother, 4 years his senior. In every photo, Thomas had his arm around Daniel, protective and proud. The face was familiar in the way that dreams are familiar, something recognized but not quite understood. Daniel traced the outline of Thomas's face with his finger, searching for emotion, for connection, for anything that felt like memory. Instead, there was only emptiness and the nagging sense of loss that had followed him for 18 years. His phone rang again. This time it was a video call from Marcus, and when he answered, there was a woman on the screen. She was in her 60s, grey-haired and worn, but her eyes, Daniel recognized those eyes. He'd seen them in mirrors, in his own reflection. Daniel? Her voice broke on his name, and suddenly, impossibly, something shifted. A crack in the wall his mind had built. He heard that voice calling through darkness, felt the weight of arms around him, the smell of lavender and vanilla. "Mom," he whispered, and began to cry. Patricia Brennan flew to Portland the next day, accompanied by Marcus and Jennifer. The reunion happened at Marcus's hotel, away from cameras and crowds, just a mother and the son she'd thought she'd lost forever. She held Daniel's face in her hands, examining every feature, every scar, every sign of the years she'd missed. "You look so much like your father," she sobbed. "God, you look just like him." They sat together for hours, Patricia showing him photographs and telling him stories about his childhood, the time he'd broken his arm falling out of a tree, his obsession with dinosaurs when he was 6, the way he'd followed Thomas everywhere, determined to do everything his older brother could do. "You worshipped him," Patricia said softly. "Thomas was your hero. After your father died, he became more than a brother. He was everything to you." Daniel listened, trying to feel something beyond the intellectual understanding that these stories were about him, but the memories remained locked away, frustratingly out of reach. "Tell me about the day we disappeared. What were we like before we left?" Patricia's expression clouded. "You were excited. You'd been planning the trip for months. Thomas had just graduated and you'd finished your finals. He was starting his engineering job in a few weeks, and you were worried about him moving away. You didn't want things to change." She paused, wiping her eyes. "But there was something else. A tension I couldn't quite identify. The morning you left, I heard you arguing in the garage. I couldn't make out the words, but Thomas sounded angry. When I asked what was wrong, he said it was nothing, just stress about the new job.